Hello everyone. Today's video is going to be talking about the fantasy series and books that I read as a child that I absolutely loved. And some of them I've even reread more recently and still love. I'm going to be mentioning 11 separate series, and some of these are standalones as well. And if you add up all the individual books in these series, it's a total of 46 books. So we got a lot to talk about. So let's jump right in. The very first series I'm going to be talking about, I have already mentioned on this channel as being one of my favorites, and that is the Inheritance Cycle, starting off with Aragon, and this is by Christopher Paolini. I'm sure everyone has heard of this series already, and maybe even seen the movie, which was kind of terrible. But the book series, at least for me, is like the perfect epic fantasy adventure. And like the main characters are likable, and there is even like a pineful romance that goes through the series that is like the perfect amount in my opinion. So basically it starts off with Aragon, and he lives in like a farm community, and he just, he just does farming stuff and he hunts. So that's like the main things he's done for, I think, the first like 18 years of his life, approximately. But then one day when he's hunting, he finds this round object, and it's really pretty and remarkable looking, and he has no idea what it is. And instead of just leaving it, he decides to take it to see if maybe he could sell it to get like money for food, because it's been a really tough winter. But as we probably can imagine, it turns out that that this object is a dragon egg, and it hatches into a blue dragon that bonds with him, and the relationship between him and the dragon, Saphira, is just, it's very interesting, and something that I wish I could have. It's definitely a world that I wish I could be in, even though there's all these conflicts, just because the dragons are just so cool, and their relationship with their bonded people is really deep and really enjoyable to read. So I definitely want to continue my reread of this, because I don't remember how the last book ends. I'm not even sure that I've read the whole thing, so definitely interested in doing a reread. Technically I started one and I'm this far into the third book, so something I'm going to do in the near future for sure. And then another big series that I really loved in school, I think I read the first book in 7th grade, is I can't even hold them all. Is the Pendragon Series. There are 10 books in this series, so it's definitely a hefty one, but they are oh so good. So like, you start off in the first book with Bobby Pendragon. I mean, he's the main character in all of these books, but he's just like a normal, 14-year-old going to school, having 14-year-old problems, and he has this uncle, an uncle named Press, who visits every now and then and brings him like weird like treasures, things he's like never really seen before and are really cool. So he loves it when his uncle comes and visits, but then one day his uncle takes him on an adventure that changes his whole life. So you learn fairly quickly in the book that there are other worlds out there and even other timelines for like Earth and whatnot. So I can't remember exactly how many different worlds there are that he can travel to, maybe like 7, but they all have like very unique environments, and like I mentioned before, there's even like different timelines of Earth, because like in the third book, we go back in time to Earth's history when the Hindenburg, the blimp, was still in use and before it burned. But there's just so many different worlds, and it's so intricate, and it's a huge adventure. You're fighting off this bad guy named Saint Dane, who is trying to take over all of these worlds and be like the supreme ruler or whatever. And Bobby Pendragon and his uncle are obviously the good guys here, and they're trying to stop Saint Dane from doing whatever it is he's trying to do. But it's sometimes hard to figure out what the right course of action is, because Saint Dane is very tricky, and sometimes what the main character does is actually what Saint Dane wanted him to do. So it's very cool. You also get to follow his 2 friends that he has in his elementary school, and they have their own adventures too, which sometimes are related, sometimes they're not. but Bobby Pendragon sometimes will send them letters through these rings that he gave them. You basically learn like what's happening to Bobby through the letters that he sends to his friends. So yeah, it's a very fun adventure and lots of twists and turns, lots of cool worlds. There's a world, for instance, where the main species on the world is like a cat species, and the humanoid like creatures are basically pets. So it's like a reversal of like how we are with our cats. So yeah, and there's also like some minor romances that kind of pull the story along too. It's just got everything, so definitely recommend. It's just a long read. It shouldn't take that long for an adult to read, but I still think it'd be worth a read as an adult. In fact, a couple years ago I did reread the first book and I enjoyed it, so I'm definitely looking forward to rereading the rest of the series. And then the next series I'm going to mention is an all-time fave. I have technically started a reread of this one already, and I'm enjoying it, but I'm still in the first book. But it is the Abarat series by Clive Barker. It is such a unique series. So you're basically following a girl named Candy Quackenbush, so it's already a ridiculous name. But she lives in Chicken Town, right? Yeah, she lives in a place called Chicken Town, and you guessed it, the main attraction, per se, is it produces a lot of chickens. And Candy is very bored with this place. She hates school, her teacher is mean to her, and she just wants some real adventure, something interesting. So at one point, she runs away from school because her teacher's oppressing her at the moment, and she runs away. She meets this strange creature called John Mischief, and let me see if I can find you a picture, because this, I definitely recommend getting the illustrated version of these, because the artwork is beautiful. So yeah, he is like this horned creature with all these little heads on his horns, and each of them have their own personality and their own name. And he is basically a master thief, and there's this particular item he's trying to keep away from this bad guy that's chasing him. So he's being chased by this very creepy guy that looks like this. He's got like these sword things that grow out of his back, and yeah, he's just very scary. He's not the main bad guy, he's basically I guess an employee of the main bad guy, Christopher Carrion, who is even creepier than that. He like looks like this, and this thing around his neck is basically a pool of nightmares. You can see the little like yellow strings, and those are all different nightmares that like swim around, go into his mind and comes out. It's really strange, but very unique. So like the artwork and the story itself is kind of creepy. There's a lot of like dark undertones, and the monsters are basically made out of like scraps of other people or dead bodies. So it's maybe too creepy for like a really young kid, but I still read it, I think in middle school, and like I just loved the story. So you follow Candy like going through this strange world called Abarat. And the main setting is that there are 12 different islands, and each island has a specific time during the day, and it never changes the time. So like midnight, it's always midnight, it's always that dark. Or like 5 p.m., the island that is 5 p.m. is just a bustling place, because that's like, if you think about in general, like 5 p.m. is like rush hour, everyone's going home, everyone's doing whatever, doing all their activities at that time. So it's definitely interesting, very unique. And there's a lot of weird creatures, so it's very fun. If you want something that's super fantastical and is on the more like mature side, like the creepy side, then this is definitely a book series for you. Another series that I really enjoyed when I was younger is the Lunar Chronicles. I have the last book as well somewhere, I couldn't find it, but the last book is called Winter. But this is really fun. It's kind of like a fairy tale retelling in a way, kind of. It's more like how the show Once Upon a Time is, where it just uses like elements of fairy tales. So like the first book's called Cinder. She's a cyborg, you know, half human, half robot, and she's basically Cinderella kind of. When she goes to like the ball or dance or whatever, she loses her foot instead of her her shoe, because she has a cyborg foot. So it's super fun. I really like things that have like fairy tale elements to them. If you don't, then maybe this isn't for you, but I thought this was a pretty unique retelling. And then like the main conflict is that the Lunar Queen is evil and trying to take over Earth as well, and Cinder kind of gets wrapped up into it. She kind of like, there's a little romance between her and the prince. So, I mean, it makes sense because she's basically Cinderella. But you find out more about her origins, and who she is more than she thought she was. So, it's very fun. to follow that. But then, like, there are other characters that, like, come into the story. So, like, we have Scarlet, who comes into the story, who is basically Little Red Riding Hood. There is even, like, these wolf warriors that the Lunar people created for soldiers. And that's an interesting aspect to, like, you, like, learn how they are made and stuff. And then we also have, like, Cress. She is, like, supposed to be Rapunzel. And she's, instead of locked in a tower, she's trapped in, like, a satellite that orbits Earth. And she's really intelligent. I really like this character in particular. Because she's just a young girl that is, like, super smart and can, like, program things, and I just really like her character a lot. So yeah, if you like fairy tale retellings at all, or aspects of fairy tales in books, then I think you'll like this. There's definitely some sci-fi elements, so you have to like a little bit of sci-fi as well. A book series that I read when I was still, I think in elementary school even, was the Inkworld series. Technically, I have not read the last book because it wasn't out when I started the series. So I definitely want to reread this series and then check out Ink Death and see if I think it completes well or if it, flops. But I really like the premise of this series. So, like, basically, if you have a certain affinity for, like, telling stories, and when you read stories out loud, you can actually make them come to life. So, I mean, who hasn't thought about, like, entering a book series that they really liked, or just a fantasy world, or like bringing a character out of that fantasy world and, getting to meet them. Like, that's just cool. So, like, at the beginning of Inkheart, which is the first book, the main character's name is Meggie, and her father, Mo, he has the ability to make stories come to life. So he's reading a book called Inkheart, an evil ruler named Capricorn comes out. So then there's, like, the book now is lacking this evil character. He's out in the real world, so it kind of, like, changes the book too, I'm pretty sure, if I remember right. But I just remember it being, like, a super cool concept, and there's also some really enjoyable characters in here. I think there's, like, a little romance as well that occurs and is... I just like fantasy books that have a good romance, and this one I remember having good romance, at least for a, elementary or middle school student age. They even have, like, little pictures, which is always fun. So it's not, like, super illustrated, but it does have, like, just, like, little etchings, which I like. So definitely, if you haven't read that series before, give it a go and see if you like it. Definitely soon I want to reread these so I can read the last book, because I really hope it ends well, because I don't want to recommend it if it, like, ends terribly, but I don't think it'll end terribly. And then a series that I'm sure everyone has heard by now and has probably even read, but I have to mention it because it had such an impact on me when I read it in, like, I think I read it in high school, so not even that young, but I still really loved it, and that is His Dark Materials series. The Golden Compass is the first book in the series, and the main character's name is Lyra, and one of the cool aspects of the magic kind of in this world is that each person gets what's called a daemon. It's kind of like a reflection of what your spirit is. When you're a child, your daemon can change shapes and just play around and be whatever it wants to be at the moment. But then when you get older, it does choose a form, and it says something about your personality. So that's fun, because, like, how cool would that be if we had one of those and we had, like, a little ferret or something running around next to us and somebody we could talk to, even if we're alone. So that's really cool, but there is something sinister going on here. Yeah, these children are, like, disappearing, and Lyra somehow gets wrapped up into figuring out what's happening, even though she's a child. But there's, like, a ton of stuff going on. There's, like, talking bears that wear armor that are really cool. There's one in particular that's, like, really awesome that kind of makes a friendship with Lyra. And there's, like, witch clans. There's, like, so much going on here. And, like, the book series just gets, like, better and more in depth and, like, crazier by the end. This book is just so good. And there is, like, the perfect amount of romance. It's not overbearing, and it's very heartwarming, heartbreaking, whatever. And it only really plays a big part at the very end. So, if you don't like romance in your books, this is, like, not overbearing. I think you'll still enjoy it. Definitely planning on doing a reread soon. Most of the YouTubers that I watch, a lot of them have just recently reread it as an adult, and they said it's even better than when they read it as a kid, so I'm definitely looking forward to doing that as well. And then I have a standalone book that I was going to recommend, but I wanted to show off the collection that I got a while ago. The recommendation is for Coraline But also, I got the Graveyard book and, fortunately, the Milk in this like bulk by Neil Gaiman. But Coraline, I'm sure you've all heard of and maybe even seen the movie. And I still think this is a good read, even if you've seen the movie, because it is like so much creepier than in the movie, even though the movie is so good. But there's like one particular scene in the movie, well, and in the book, that if you've seen it, you'll know what I'm talking about. But there's like a cocoon at one point close to the end of the book that the main character Coraline goes up to. And like in the book, I was super creeped out when I read that. Like it's a little creepy in the movie, but like in the book, it was so much creepier. So I definitely recommend it. It's a quick read. I mean, it's not even 200 pages, and it's, juvenile fiction sized words. So definitely a quick read, but so worth it. Definitely recommend everybody do this. Everybody read this. It's just so creepy and it's so good. I need to reread it sometime. But the Graveyard book is also a pretty decent read. I only read it because I got this like pack of books. I probably wouldn't have read it otherwise. But it's like, basically, there's this boy. His name is Nobody. Nobody Owens. But his friends call him Bod. But his friends being ghosts in this graveyard. So at the beginning of the book, so basically this boy, his whole family gets murdered, but somehow the murderer misses this child, and this child is being protected in this graveyard. But the murderer still wants to kill the entire family. So as long as Bod stays in the graveyard, he is safe. But as he gets older, he wants to explore more. So you're kind of like it's kind of like a coming of age story, but with like this weird creepy element of like ghosts, which aren't scary, but obviously they are creepy, and this like murderer. But it's like really good. I was very surprised that it was as good as it was. So if you like Coraline, I think you'll like this book as well. And then I'm not sure if the whole series that I'm about to mention is good. I just remember enjoying at least the first 3 books, and that is the Pendragon Chronicles series. There are a total of like 7 books in the series. I think I randomly picked this up when I was in middle school or elementary school, just at the library, and I really enjoyed like the concept. So like in like the first book, with this guy named David he's going to school and he's going to college in this particular town, and so he needs to rent out a room while he's going to college because he's not going to live there forever, he thinks. So he rents out this room with this woman who has a child. And this woman, her name is Liz, and what she does for a living is she makes these clay dragons. They're like small, like just cute little figurines. And her little daughter, named Sophie, she is really cute. She's really young, and she treats these dragons like they're alive. But then you kind of get the impression that maybe these dragons are real. Maybe they come to life. David can't like see them move or anything, so he's not sure. But sometimes he like thinks he hears something, but then he goes and looks and there's nothing there. But soon after his arrival, Liz makes him his own dragon, and it's a dragon with like a notepad and a pencil, because David is going to school to be like a writer. And kind of throughout the first book, he's like kind of developing this relationship almost with this dragon, and sometimes when he's trying to write a story, he will get like a word in his mind, and in his mind he sees his dragon writing it on a notepad. So he thinks it's just like his imagination, but then maybe it's not his imagination. So it's really fun. I like the idea of like a dragon figurine coming to life, because like as a kid, like if you have a favorite toy, like you kind of want Toy Story to be real, where they come to life and stuff. So that's really fun. So yeah, I don't know. I really like the series so far, and I kind of want to read more of them just to like see if I like it. If nothing else, I'm going to collect them for my future children, I guess. Alright, and then a standalone book that I just had to mention. It's not exactly fantasy, but it's got like fantastical elements to it. It is called At the Back of the North Wind by George MacDonald. It's like a children's classic. I read this, I think, in high school. I don't know, sometimes in the library I would just like scroll around and randomly pick up something, and like I just really loved the vibe that this cover gave. I was really in love with it just from the get-go, so I borrowed it and gave it a go, and like it's one of the most impactful books that I've read. I need to reread it for sure to like see how it impacts me now, but like basically following this little boy named Diamond. His family's kind of poor. His dad is like a coach driver. So they have like this horse also named Diamond. And our main character, he kind of gets sick sometimes. And at one point, I think when he's sick, he gets visited by this lady. She's called the North Wind. And she takes him on these little adventures with her while she's doing her North Wind activities. There's like some life lessons in here. At one point, for instance, she like sinks a ship and Diamond has to be like, why'd you do this? I don't understand. I think you like find out later that the fact that the ship sank was a turning point in another man's life who like owned the shipping company, and it ended up being good for him. So like there's like some really like thoughtful things that go on here. And while Diamond goes on these adventures, you have this like constant questioning of your perception of the story. Is like, is Diamond actually experiencing these things? Because it kind of seems like it, because sometimes he'll like go somewhere and he'll like wake up with like a flower or something, so like seems like it's happening, but then like also it is obviously crazy if it were actually happening, you know? So you're kind of questioning, like, is magic real? Is the North Wind real? It's just, like, so good. And, like, near the end, it's, like, such feels, basically. I don't want to tell you what happens at all. I just want you to read it and then feel the feels and ask the questions and reflect. That's basically what this book is. But, like, it impacted me so much that, like, if I ever got a tattoo, like, I might want to get the North Wind in there. Yeah, I need to read this again. But I definitely recommend it. It's a children's classic. I think it's just as impactful for children as it would be for adults. So yeah, give it a go. Let me know what you think. And then another series that I've only read the first book of, but I do own the next 3 books. The series is called The Book of Ember. So the first book is called The City of Ember. I don't think I own the first book. I borrowed it from the library a couple years ago to reread it. Still enjoyed it. But I do have like the second book and the next 3 books after that. So I'll just talk about the first book, though, because that's the only one I've read. So in the first book, basically everybody is living underground because of some tragedy that happened above ground. It probably was uninhabitable up there. So everyone's living underground. And you follow, like, these 2 kids that just got their first job. One of them is, like, works in the, kind of like the sewers, but does, like, maintenance down there. And the other one is, like, a messenger. Like, she takes letters to people and does stuff like that. But basically, you follow these characters, and they're living in this world, and they are starting to have limited resources. So, like, the stores are having less and less canned goods. It's less variety, at least. So you don't get, like, pineapples anymore. You don't get basically any canned fruit. It's really hard to find anything. And then also, light bulbs are in short supply, and sometimes the electricity for the entire city will go out for several seconds at a time. And it's very scary when that happens because they are underground so far and there's no other light. So you get the impression that, like, soon all the resources and all the power are going to be gone and they don't know what they're going to do. And you kind of follow these two kids who are, like, doing their own little investigations into, like, what's happening and why the power keeps going out and stuff like that. And it was really a nice read. Like, I like the characters. They have a good relationship with each other. I don't think it's romantic. It's just, you know, kid relationships, and it's pretty nice. And I like the mystery. Even when I reread it, like, I enjoyed the mystery. The next books happen after all of that drama, and I'm very curious to see if the next books hold up as well as I view the first book. So definitely give it a go and see if you like it as well. And then the last series that I'm going to talk about for this recommendation list is called the Pendragon Series. The first book is called Sabriel. So yeah, you're following Sabriel in the first book. She is not exactly a necromancer, but she can use these bells, and she can use those to go into the rivers of death and bring things back from death. It's kind of complex. Like, there are 7 different levels of death. I'm pretty sure it's 7. So, like, the first river is the easiest one to get into and to leave. Like, you start off this book where this character went into death just to save this pet bunny because she shouldn't have done it, but she wanted to do it for this girl that she knew. So you're kind of like getting introduced into the rivers of death just by, like, this first instance. But the bells that she carries are pretty dangerous to use. If you don't like ring them correctly, you can like be dragged into death instead of like resisting. So it gets pretty complex, but it explains it very well in the book. I think the main struggle of the first book is that Sabriel is trying to save her father, because her father is the Abhorsen, and he's the main guy that does all the Abhorsen stuff. And she doesn't know everything yet. She is still like a young adult going to school, because he wanted her to have an education before she took over his job, basically. So she doesn't know everything. He's just been training her here and there, but then he like disappears. Kind of sends her like an obscure message, and she has to like figure out what happened. So that's her main struggle in this book, but she kind of like figures out what her father was doing and the bad guys that he was dealing with, and she kind of gets sucked into that world. The next book, Lirael, is even better than the first book, and then the third book, The Abhorsen, concludes all of that struggle very nicely. There are 3 more books after that, but I have not read them yet, so I will do that soon. But the first 3 books kind of wrap up nicely, so I'm thinking the next 3 books are kind of their own trilogy. So you only have to read 3. Technically, you could just read Sabriel, but like I said, Lirael is even better. So at least read the first 3, and then maybe if you really like it too, you could read the next 3 after that. Alrighty, so that was a lot of books to go through. I hope that some of those you haven't read, so that you can get some recommendations. A lot of these are pretty popular, so sorry if you have read them all already, but these are just the best ones that I had when I was growing up, and I still feel very strongly for them, even when I have reread some of them as adults. So yeah, all of these to me are like top tier enjoyment, at least. I'm rating them based on like how much I enjoyed them when I first read them. So yeah, I hope y'all have a great day and found some good books to read, and I will see you in the next video.